Hey folks, Brian Bledsoe with you here once again, host of the Desert Farmer Podcast. Thanks so much for joining me today, March 24th. It is a Tuesday. I hope you are doing well. I know a lot of us need some rain and would love a weather pattern change that kind of doesn't feel so much like July. So we're going to see what we can do about getting some of us, a little bit of water off and on over the next few weeks or so. Got a lot of stuff to talk to you about, not only in the short term, but also in those outer periods, which I think are going to be critical as we go forward. But before I dive into that, a lot of you have been asking me about, hey, what do I need to do to sign up for your services? Or can you help us out here, folks? I got a lot of different clients scattered all over the Great Plains, from Montana all the way to Texas. And if there's something I can do for you, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, whether it's day-to-day forecasts or just something more medium to long range. Just simply hit up my cell phone, or you can email me, brian@brianbledsoeweather.com, or you can go to my website. It's just simply brianbledsoeweather.com. Smash that blue bar in the middle, get in touch with me. Make sure to put your email and your cell phone number down so I can get back in touch with you. All right, after that little bit of advertising, let's see where we've been over the past 60 days in terms of precipitation anomalies here. Now, again, you don't need me to tell you who's been dry and who hasn't. The Intermountain West has obviously been very dry. Mountains of Colorado have been just abysmal as far as snowpack is concerned. The mountains of New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, even Southwest Wyoming have been no different. We've also had this quadrant, all right through here from Northeast New Mexico, the Panhandles, South Central and Southeast Colorado, into Southwest Kansas, where I'm going to erase that. And you can see right there in Elkhart, Kansas, that is a 2% of average in terms of precipitation. Now, for some of you that may participate in annual forage or PRF, you're like, hey, I've gotten several texts from you say, hey, let's just skate through the end of March and be completely dry, and let's just start bringing in some water thereafter. And I think there's a lot of reason to suggest that that's probably what's going to happen for a lot of you, as I'll show you in more detail here in just a second. But I always like to set the table with who's been driest. I had a good conversation with a gentleman down in Hondo, Texas today, and we were talking about the drought situation that's been off and on in that part of the world for the past 2 to 3 years. And you can see South Central Texas has obviously been in very rough shape. Now, conversely, we've had decent moisture here from parts of North Dakota down into Northeast South Dakota, and we've had decent moisture in this sector of Montana, far South Central New Mexico, and a little ribbon that's been going through this corridor here, which in the grand scheme of things, I think we're going to do a lot better in terms of moisture farther east. Most of you know that already. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but we're going to discuss it in more detail here pretty shortly. Let's look at our current short-term drought index, where it's been expanding. Really throughout most of this area that I'm highlighting, it's been expanding. Some of these areas here have done better, save for far south Texas, which is still rough. But this is the area of concern here where we need to make up some ground in a hurry. And there are some signs with the upcoming pattern change that's actually going to help us out, at least some of us. But the devil's always in the details. So we got to figure that out, obviously, as we get closer, which kind of leads me to my next topic of discussion, which these maps have been all over the internet, all over social media. And I think in the grand scheme of things, there's been no proper context shared about what these maps really mean. All right. And that's why I'm saying beware of the green blobs that you see released from the Climate Prediction Center in the 6 to 10 day outlook, the 8 to 14 day outlook, and the 3 to 4 week outlook, because I really don't think it really does the forecast a good service. Because when's the last time we saw a map that looks like that verify, where just almost everybody has been above average? And the problem with this is nobody looks at the scale down here on the lower right. They're just simply looking at the green. They simply see something like above, all right? And are you telling me that Clayton, New Mexico from March 29th through April 2nd is going to be above average in terms of moisture? That's a tough sell for me, all right? So to shotgun these images out there and provide very little context to the people who use them most. Yes, I'm talking directly to you, ag sector, because I see a lot of these maps shared by folks that are in agriculture, and they do nothing but crap all over the map because they know that it's probably not going to verify for a good part of the region. All right. What these types of maps are designed to do is to give you an idea of the pattern change that's taking place and maybe which way the pattern is leaning. All right. As I said, I'm pretty much certain that not everybody that is in this green area is going to end up above average in moisture from the 29th through the 2nd. Will there be some areas that do? Sure. Okay. But I think it's just such a broad brush that it really kind of diminishes the value of the product, in my opinion. All right. I think it could be done better. But as I've said, the people that consume it the most, the Climate Protection Center is not catering this product to you in the ag sector. That's my opinion on the subject. So whether it's the 6 to 10 day outlook or look at the 8 to 14 day outlook, look at the darker green here. All right. That goes all the way from the Mexico-U.S. border all the way up here into Canada. All right. That's showing above average. Now, in that 8 to 14 day outlook, I think there's a good shot that there's going to be some areas in here that do actually verify. Will those areas be all the way back down here in the Southwest Texas? We're just going to have to see. As we go through this pattern change during a time of seasonal change, we always have to be careful with this stuff because at the end of the day, as I mentioned earlier, the devil is always in the details. There's always going to be a dry slot that works out with the storm. There's always going to be some type of precipitation failure. And there's always drought that we're dealing with. And a lot of times the models come in too wet for some of these areas that are dealing with drought. Now, the 3 to 4 week outlook, all right, I think actually does a better job showing you what's going on, showing you that there is a definite bias the farther east you go with the moisture versus areas back out here to the west. I think you could put this together really for the next 4 weeks, not just the next 3 to 4 weeks, but really from now right through the next 4 weeks. And this map here probably has a better chance of verifying than the map that I showed you, those other two maps. So bottom line, I just want you to be very careful if you're consuming this product, and just take it with a grain of salt and really dial things in as we get closer to this pattern change and focus on those details. Those are going to be the most important things to focus on as you get closer. And I know it's frustrating to a lot in the ag sector. I know why a lot of you guys take these maps with a grain of salt, because there's not a lot of specificity to it, and it is an incredibly broad brushed type of product. All right. That's all I want to say about that. Let's move into some of these details. All right. The forecast upper level weather pattern from March 24th through March 31st. This is where we start today. All right. Obviously, ridge of high pressure over the southwest, very powerful ridge of high pressure, and it's going to continue to get even more powerful. All right. As I put this into motion, notice that it grows and expands eastward. And then eventually, after that last little leg kind of flexes and then pushes eastward, notice what happens here along the Pacific coast. Again, this is by March 31st. We don't get any significant energy to come into the picture until the very last day of March, and as we turn the calendar into April. So that's another reason that it gives me pretty high confidence, all right, that a lot of these areas that were very dry in southeast Colorado, southwest Kansas, northeast New Mexico, the panhandles, that you're probably going to see that last week of March be completely dry for most of those areas, because it takes until the 1st of April to get this storm system on the coast and for that trough ridge pattern to build like that. We needed this ridge to get farther east. Now, initially, okay, you might say, well, what's this little feature down here in the Gulf of America? Well, it's a little area of upper level low pressure. Whenever you see something like that in that place, what it does is it kind of acts to block any type of significant moisture coming northward out of the Gulf. It keeps it down here in the Gulf. So I guess if we're looking at this pattern, all right, I'm glad this thing is here now instead of when this piece of energy makes its way farther east. It at least gives us an opportunity for the Gulf to open back up for some of this moisture to combine with some of the energy that's coming out west. All right. That takes us right there through the first. Okay. That's the way the pattern's going to start. So when we look at forecast total liquid probability at 1/10 of an inch or greater from today through 6 o'clock Mountain Time on April 1st, this is what you get. All right. Greater than 1/10 of an inch. Look at these probabilities, just awful probabilities here. All right. 0 to 20%. That white is 0 to 10%. So as I said, PRF folks, annual forage folks, if you are looking for it to be completely dry right through the end of March, I think you're probably going to be in luck unless something massive happens that completely changes this pattern. And right now, I just don't see that happening because the signal is too strong for the ridge to be dominant for the majority of that time. You're going to have to go farther east through this sector or over the top like that to get better opportunities to see some significant moisture. And believe me, the mountain communities here, Wyoming, Utah, even Colorado, going to do a little bit better. What about 1/2 of an inch or greater through the same time frame? Well, again, no real opportunity here in the middle part of the country. Mountain communities here, maybe Colorado, or it's farther east. All right. What about 1 inch or greater? Even worse. All right. Probably 1 inch or greater, you're going to have your best probabilities here from Northeast Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, right there in the Corn Belt. None of that stuff down here in Texas because the pattern hasn't changed enough to put us in a position to do that. Okay. Significant pattern change is needed here. And we're going to start to see that, I think. So let's move on to the 7-day period beyond that. April 1st through April 8th. Let's start out with April 1st. I just showed this to you a little bit ago. Watch this feature, watch this feature, watch this feature as I take you through this animation. All right. Watch what happens here. That upper low gets out of the way. The ridge focuses itself over the east, and we have a trough that focuses itself out here across parts of the west. Now, we're talking a long way out there. So the signaling, the finer details with that signaling here, do you see how that upper level low just kind of washes out? It's hard to say what kind of energy is going to kick out here into the plains. It's that time of year when we think about some significant energy possibly ejecting out into the plains. We get some return flow out of the Gulf of America, and we do business here in the middle part of the country. However, I would much rather see something slow moving, all right, slow moving, get organized back in this quadrant, all right, that is strong enough and slow moving enough to yank that moisture back in this direction. Because as it stands right now, in my opinion, most of that moisture is going to shear eastward, just with the way the pattern is looking right now. All right, that's my fear about this. There's a lot of different signaling in the modeling that suggests that, and I don't have any reason to disagree with it. But I'm long game. All right, I'm in this for the long game because it isn't just going to come with one pattern change. There's got to be some teeth to it. And as long as we keep this bagginess out here, all right, in the west and the southwest, and maybe a little bit of a hint of some subtropical jet energy coming up here, we have better opportunities than what we've had, which really haven't been much. So it's not going to take a whole lot to beat it, right? Yeah, that's kind of one thing. So let's look at the forecast total probability at 1/10 of an inch or greater all the way through March or April 8th. So from today, the 24th, right through April 8th. That's when we start to see things get better. Some of these probabilities fill in. Some of them really don't. All right. This area, again, is the trouble spot. We're talking probability of 1/10 of an inch or greater only in the 50 to 60% range right there. And in some places, maybe not even that. You have to go farther north, northeast, and east to see those probabilities light up. So when we flip the script to 1/2 of an inch or greater through April 8th, all right, this is the area that, again, is probably going to struggle. Now, those probabilities are still there, all right? Not saying that we can't get lucky with some thunderstorms or whatnot. It's possible, all right? I would just like to see those probabilities be better. I would like to see the ones like we have up here, and certainly the ones that we have in these quadrants right here. What about an inch or greater? There you go. You see that donut hole? Okay. You knew it was coming. I've been warning you. So that takes us through the 8th at an inch or greater. And certainly, I would say that anywhere along and east of that line certainly has the best opportunities. Now, we've got some opportunity back in this sector. We've got some opportunity here in the mountains, doing a little bit better right there. But I'm fearful that we get dry slotting to come out this way and have these storms organized better the farther east you go. So when we look at total forecast liquid here through April 8th, right, this is what you get. This is one model. I don't want you to focus on the individual numbers. That's not why I'm putting this out there, all right? I'm doing it to show you the trend, all right? So from now through April 8th, through the morning of April 8th, again, notice where those higher end totals are. And notice the gradient here on the west and the northwest side, where we go from an inch in southwest Oklahoma to struggling to make a third of an inch there in Dalhart, or in Elkhart, or Lamar, or back here around Clovis or Tucumcari, okay? This initial pattern change has a notable eastward bias. Now, by the same token, we are also have some better opportunities for moisture here across Montana, Wyoming, western Colorado, parts of the Dakotas, even Nebraska, you know, that have been ravaged by those fires. Are you telling me that western Nebraska, if we got some amounts of 3/4 of an inch there in western Nebraska between now and April 8th, there are a lot of folks that would love to have that. Although I would just say temper your expectations a little bit on this, all right? Because this is a long ways out there. And if the model is already painting a pretty sharp gradient here on the west and the northwest side, you know that that's going to be kind of the trend, that this is your corridor to focus on, okay? This is the European Artificial Intelligence Ensemble. Kind of the same story, but look, see, it cuts that there in western Nebraska by about 3/10 of an inch, all right? Still got the same signatures here, graded even a little tighter here on the west and the northwest side. And as I've said, you know, for a long time, I've talked to a lot of farmers across the western part of Oklahoma, West Texas, eastern New Mexico. Every single one of them almost always tells me it's got to rain east for it to rain back to the west. And you see that happen time and time again. And with so many areas still struggling with dry soil moisture, or lack of soil moisture, I should say, and some drought, we've got to shove some water in the ground regionally to help some of this stuff out. But the artificial intelligence model does have somewhat of the same signature in painting that corridor with the better, more meaningful moisture, certainly. And as I've said, winter isn't done either, okay? Winter's not done. We're going to get some snow here in the Colorado mountains, Wyoming. We may even have some snow down here at some of the lower elevations too out of this. If we can get a big enough piece of energy to come out, snag some cooler air, there's not a lot of cold air left to tap, at least right now. You know, it's been bitterly cold across parts of Alaska, north central Canada, but we haven't been able to get any of that air down here of any consequence, at least lately. But don't be surprised, okay? Don't be surprised if some of that moisture that falls here across western Nebraska, southeast Wyoming, up here across the Dakotas, Minnesota, ends up falling as some snow. We could even have some of that fall as far south as, say, northwest Kansas or eastern Colorado. But again, details way out there. We're talking just a trend here. Details way out there. Don't focus on the actual numbers. The European extended model forecast from April 8th through May 8th looks like this. And before I show you this, this is a very important thing to talk about with the European extended model. When it initializes every night and when it runs, and if the weather pattern that it initializes on is either dry or wet, all right, a lot of times it will carry that flavor of the forecast forward over the next several weeks. So if it starts out dry, it needs something to focus on to buck that trend and change what that trend is, okay? So again, this is the 8th through the 8th. This is the 30-day average upper level weather pattern from the 8th through the 8th. What do I notice here? Okay. Well, what I notice is we've got kind of a trough that does something like this. All right. With a pattern. We've also got a pattern that comes back in down here across the south and the southwest. All right. Right through here. And I'm focused on that because if we have that energy in the southwest, what do you get? Well, you're still warmer than average here for the most part across the west and the southwest high plains. We have a little bit of cooling taking place in Montana, Wyoming. All right. But what that means to me is we've got storm systems coming out like this and better potential for some moisture from the Gulf to come up like this. So that's what the precipitation anomaly forecast looks like. All right. Wetter than average wherever you're seeing the green, especially from central and east Texas, all the way into the Mississippi Valley. But notice some of these areas here that have been dry are starting to light up with at least a little bit above average moisture potential right there. This is a long ways out there. Take this model with a grain of salt if you like, but the model has to recognize a pattern change for it to change what it's been spitting out for quite some time. This is definitely something that I'm watching closely. Not the details of it. Don't get me wrong. Just simply the pattern change. All right. Let's give you a quick ENSO update here. Looking at the sea surface temperatures, we obviously have a very positive Pacific meridional mode right through here off the west coast of North America and off the Baja. We've got warmer than average water off the west coast of South America. We've got warmer than average water here. We have very, very little cooler right there. All right. So we've been shrinking that cool water. And our latest Nino 3.4 index is actually the least positive it's been in months, right there to negative 0.2. Remember, down here to around negative 0.5, that's what you need for technical definition to be meeting La Nina criteria. All right. But at least from a sea surface temperature anomaly standpoint, we're negating that. And another thing that we have to look at the Southern Oscillation Index value here. Remember, Southern Oscillation Index deals with the pressure pattern differences from Darwin, Australia to Tahiti. So all you really need to know about this is that anything above about 8, all right, reflects the atmosphere kind of being in a La Nina state. Anything below -8 would be El Nino state. So what we're watching here is kind of the remnants of a La Nina-like pattern. You don't need me to tell you that if you've been dry in those west and southwest high plains, because that's what a La Nina pattern does. But we're still seeing some of the remnants of this. There's a lot of indications to suggest that the Southern Oscillation Index is going to fall, especially the more warm water we develop across the equatorial Pacific. And a little bit of a bullet point here on the Southern Oscillation Index. It's not the perfect metric to measure whether or not we're in El Nino or La Nina. It is one metric. So there's some noise that comes into play here with the Southern Oscillation Index that can give us at least some false sense of confidence in what it's doing. But for right now, I think it's doing an okay job, relatively speaking. If we look at the trade wind forecast, again, all right, this is where we've been from the 22nd of February, all right, westerly wind bursts here, easterly La Nina-like there. Look at this, though, from the 24th through April 8th. Look at the westerly wind bursts we've got going on here, okay? Very, very little easterly enhanced trade winds coming into play. This westerly wind burst type of setup will only add to a push into as we move toward El Nino as we go forward. So this type of setup is still very much remaining in the forecast. And the latest forecast from the Bureau of Meteorology, looking at sea surface temperatures, remember the BOM has a different metric. Anything above positive 0.8 is El Nino. Anything below negative 0.8 is La Nina. There's where we are right now. All right. You can see that it rapidly takes it up here. Those gray lines, individual members, you know the deal. The closer they are, the greater confidence that the model is exhibiting in the forecast. And you can see we're right there at above 0.8 by May and up there at around 2.4 still by September. That would put us into super El Nino territory. So the BOM has not wavered in this forecast, which brings me to my next point. The latest Climate Prediction Center seasonal forecast outlook looks like this for April, May, and June. All right, precipitation anomalies. Drier than average for this area for April. All right, April, May, and June is what it's got right there. Wetter than average here. It's been a lot drier than average here in the southeast. All right, I'm not sure why there is no wetter than average signal in this area. All right, but April, May, June, I'm okay with some of these western areas being dry during April. All right. Not so sure about May and June, as I'll show you in just a second. Temperature-wise, most of that heat, the way they see it, is focused out here in the Intermountain West. Great Basin, right? Still an opportunity for maybe some cool air to come down this way. May, June, July, notice that dry signal goes away here, and most of the western high plains is a little bit more focused up here to the northwest, and we actually have an early monsoonal surge here coming up through Arizona, New Mexico, even to West Texas, and across the southeast. So May, June, July, generally giving off average vibes here across parts of the western high plains, save for maybe up here over western portions of Nebraska or maybe eastern Kansas. But if there's going to be a wetter than average corridor there for May and June, I would say this, you could probably broaden it a little bit more at least. And May, we may still be getting water come up through here, okay? May, June, July heat, we start to focus a little bit more here, but also the main component is out here still in the Great Basin, where we still have a lot of dryness going on. What about June, July, August? This was the big mind scrambler to me. And I'm sure it was to a lot of you on online earlier this, when this got released here over the past few days or so. Big monsoonal push here, dry here for June, July, August. Now, that is completely counter to what history shows us, all right? And I've talked a lot about that here on the Desert Farmer podcast, that a lot of times El Nino events do okay here in the middle part of the country. It's not perfect, and then I'm usually the most concerned, especially for after mid-July, all right? After mid-July, I'm most concerned for this area of dryness, all right? I don't have a problem with that southern part. I have a little bit more of a problem for areas west and northwest. But historically, when we have an El Nino come on, south central and southeast Kansas, east and southeast Oklahoma, east and southeast Texas, down along the Gulf Coast, will oftentimes struggle for moisture. That's why a lot of times when we get front-loaded moisture in April, May, and early June, we piggyback that, or bookend that, I should say, with flash drought down across parts of Texas as we get into the crux of the summertime, all right? Heat, June, July, August, you can see where it's located right there. But if we're drier here, we're going to be hotter too. So that's something that I don't necessarily agree with. So some things that I don't necessarily agree with that middle part. And the July, August, September is the same story. I'm not sure I agree with this whole thing here either, all right? Especially with the big monsoonal push that they're calling for right there. There's a lot of differences and a lot of uncertainty and a lot of disagreement here with how things are going to roll this summer. And I think the fact that we're pushing toward El Nino has a lot to deal with it. And notice this is interesting too. Look where the main heat focus is. With a lot of El Nino events, we don't have a big heat signal here in the plains. In fact, a lot of times it's the exact opposite. So to see their temperature outlook here kind of look better with that, I can buy that a little bit more, all right? It's just the precipitation forecast that I'm a little bit unsure about, all right? And I know I'm not the only one. Folks, it's been an absolute pleasure to share a lot of this information with you. Please give me your feedback on this, all right? I want all the smoke. If you're saying this is garbage, we don't like it, this is not going to happen, whatever, just put some feedback in there, all right? The thing that I'm really focused on here, though, is there is uncertainty, and there's okay. It is okay to say that there's uncertainty. It's okay to monitor the forecasts as we go throughout. Look, I know that a lot of us have to make decisions, and a lot of us have to make some of those decisions maybe sooner than we would like. But I've said this on this platform many times. I am always more about letting the game come to me as I can versus getting in a rush and making a decision when I don't have to. And I've reached out and had a lot of conversations with a lot of you about this in the past several days, because I know a lot of you are trying to make some decisions. But unless you absolutely have to make that decision, or you just can't see a reason not to, I'm always under the guise, if you will, or I'm always more about letting the game come to you. It helps make those decisions easier and to be able to discuss them. to see what they mean going forward. So I know a lot of you are subscribed to that as well. But if you're trying to get in a hurry and you haven't seen that pattern shift yet, and you haven't had any moisture yet, why are you getting in a hurry? Let's wait. Let's see how this plays out. Let's see how the next couple of weeks plays out, and see what really actually happens and see how that changes. Because, like I said, a lot of times these models with that initial pattern change, they end up being a little bit too wet and they work their way back in as we get closer. And I know you don't want to believe that. And I know that may disappoint a lot of you. And maybe some of you that don't want to hear that or listen to it, get there and say, you said it was going to rain like crazy. And it didn't. No. Remember this day. Remember what we're talking about today. Remember that these are models. These are projections. All right. There is nothing about that is set in stone. We are looking for trends that we can use to manage risk, whatever that risk may be. And that's really kind of the long and short of it. So if you've got thoughts on the situation, be sure to fire away. Not only here on YouTube, hit me up on X too. I'm going to kick that out there. It's time to ride, folks. We are headed into spring. Seasons are changing, patterns changing. Let's see how we play this thing out. And I'll be chatting with you again real soon, right here on the Desert Farmer Podcast. Take care.